Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to the third annual playthrough and hopefully the first annual Board Game Bandit panel playthrough. My name is Jim Price. I'm the Board Game Bandit. I'm a software engineer by day, Board Game Bandit by night, Pizza Bandit all the time in between, and a lot of other things. I like all types of games. I tend to be in the 60 to 90-minute range. I like a lot of deck building, variable player powers. I have a very big passion about teaching other people. I've been demoing to great people all day and every day this convention. It's been great. And I'm very passionate about protecting the games that I feel have been forgotten by time. And I'll speak more about that in a little bit, but I'd like to introduce my accomplices first.
Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Trager. You may also know me as the Settler of Catan, Mayor of Machikoro. I've been involved in games for a long time. When I was a little girl, my dad was in the Marines and he went overseas and he sent me back the game of Trouble. And he told me that when he got back, we'd play together. And that pretty much sparked my love of board games. I've been involved in the industry professionally for a couple of years now as a professional demonstrator for stores in the region. I'm also the representative for a bunch of different companies that produce games for us to play, and I love games so much. And I'm really excited to share my passions with you today.
Hi, I'm Dara. I'm really too into board games. I'm probably the newest into the hobby of the three of us. I only really got into it around 2013. I'm really into cooperative games. I spend a lot of time teaching games. I've worked with Triangle Game Night hosting in the past, and I'm currently working with Game Theory. So if you want to come out and try some games on Tuesday nights.
Great. So the topic for today is something I call one-year wonders, and it's specifically about the cult of the new in board games. Basically, what we're saying is that most games will only make an impact for up to 1 year before they're forgotten by time and replaced by other games that come afterwards. If you don't believe this to be a problem, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd actually like to challenge that by reading a quote from a prominent game designer, Martin Wallace, who did a lot of train games. This is him talking about a very famous game called Power Grid. I cannot say the game is definitively a classic. What I do know is that it still gets played regularly around the UK game scene. The vast majority of board games get dragged out once or twice and then are chucked to one side to collect dust until either auctioned or hidden in the loft by the better half. Power Grid has hung around because it has that certain something about it that makes you happy to sit down and play a game. So this is one of the most celebrated board game designers of all time saying that he only plays a game once or twice before it's cast to the side. So if industry experts are saying that there's a problem, there definitely is a problem. For my criteria, this was really difficult because I have several spheres of influence in gaming, but I do not represent the world at large, unfortunately. And if you're in my sphere of influence, some of the games that I'll mention may be very common to you because I taught them to you. But what I'm saying is that I don't think the industry at large cares about them anymore. And how do we do that? We base on, well, what were people saying about it back then? What are people saying now? How is the game selling? A big indication for me is going to be, what is the mass market availability of a game? If a game is being sold in Target, Toys R Us, Walmart, Barnes & Nobles, that's generally a good sign that it's doing well. If people who care nothing about gaming are using it to try and make money, that means that the game is doing really well, in my opinion, because they see it as a valuable business proposition. What did you guys use for your criteria?
Go ahead. Okay. So I actually have quite a bit of industry experience. Like I said, I've worked in the industry for a couple of years now. I work for a couple of different gaming stores, one here in North Carolina that I've actually just recently stepped away from, and then another one down in Greenville, North Carolina. And then I represent about 50 plus different companies through different demonstration programs. So where I'm coming from with my picks is what I've seen people react to throughout the state, throughout the region, and even to some extent throughout the nation as I've traveled for these companies and that kind of thing. And so what I'm basing my criteria on is the games that I have seen people interact with as I have seen people in game stores and that kind of thing, as well as I've let some of my own personal influence in here. The games that I picked were ones that I was personally familiar with, whether that means that I was really excited about them, wasn't very excited, thought that they were terrible, thought they were great, something like that. It's games that I feel like I can talk about knowledgeably, but also that I feel like I have some industry information on as well.
As a comparatively new gamer, I had to use some internet resources and a little bit of speculation. A lot of the games prior when I started getting in 2013, some of those games I haven't played, a lot of them. So I had to speculate a bit, but I based it on Board Game Geek ratings to a large extent, looking up top 10 lists for the years. And I just want to note that one thing about that is relying on Board Game Geek allows a bit of game snobbery, because a game such as Munchkin, which no one would say was not successful, has a lower ranking than any of the games I'm going to mention today as forgotten. So that said, take pretty much everything on my list with a grain of salt.
And we are by no means experts. This is our opinion, and hopefully we'll try and convey that as efficiently as possible. We also want to know what you think. So after we get through our list of games, we definitely love to take questions from the audience, or if you want to challenge something we said, we're certainly happy to do that. So please keep that in mind as we present our games. So let's go to the first list, the games that did not survive from around 2013. Dara, you're up first.
All right. The first game I chose is actually the only one of the three that I have played. It's Carnival Zombie. Could you raise your hand if you have heard of or played this game? Sweet. I chose one we have forgotten. It is a cooperative tower defense game where you are in Venice and you are fighting off the infected. It was around $99. It was one of my first board game purchases because I make mistakes. It was highly recommended. I remember starting off watching reviews from the Dice Tower, and before I got really a good idea of their different personalities and how they might be compatible with my likes and dislikes, I just kind of took what they said as, this is one of the best zombie games. I'm like, okay, cool. And I bought it. I had trouble buying it. I had to even wait for it because it was the availability was very spotty, and it is now out of print. In 2015, they announced that there would be a Kickstarter for a second edition that has not launched yet. Part of that is that it is a small designer, and they are currently collaborating or trying to collaborate with a larger publisher. So would it be popular had it stayed in print? I don't think so. I had a lot of difficulties with the rulebook, and it's a up to 6-player game, but when you play, you have to have all 6 characters, even if you have fewer players. So in my experience playing it probably the 3 times that I did, is that by the time it got to the 6 players' turn, there was very little for them left to do. So I think that would have inhibited it, even if not for the problems with distribution.
All right, my first pick, I have to caveat a little bit. It's not quite a board game. It's a tabletop miniatures game, but it was Sails of Glory. Has anybody played this one? No? Oh, you guys make me sad. But I totally get it. I bought into this one. I think it was about the same price point. It was somewhere around $100 to get the starter kit. It was this game where it was supposed to be a naval exploration and war game where you would have these little miniature ships, and you would put them out on the sea, and you would pilot the ships, and then you would find other ships and go to war with these ships. And it was fairly innovative for the miniature scene because it has a fairly simplistic rule set. A lot of miniatures games, if you have any experience with them, they have extremely complex rule sets. They have, seriously books for, if you're in this situation, this is what you do. If this is the way the die rolls, this is what you do. They're just thing after thing after thing to go through just some very simple battles. So Sails of Glory had come out with this rule set that was fairly simplistic for a tabletop miniatures game. The miniatures were nicely done. They were pre-painted miniatures, so you didn't have to assemble or paint anything. It was very easy to get this game onto the table. You could do simple exploration quests. You could go into these really complex naval battles if you wanted to. You could play with just the base set if you wanted to, or you could expand and buy different ships and that kind of thing to fill out your fleet. I love the ocean. I love exploration games. I thought this was going to be so fun, especially because it looked good. It looked like a fun game. It looked impressive, while having what seemed like should have been a low barrier to entry for new players. unfortunately, this one just didn't really take off. The company also did something called Wings of Glory, which was a similar game system, but it used airplanes instead of ships. So you should do like air battles and that kind of thing. It just, for whatever reason, it didn't take off. I think it may have been too board gamey for people who like tabletop miniatures games, and too tabletop miniatures games for people who like board games. So I think it fell in a bad spot there. But it just didn't do very well. They had plans that if it had done well, they were going to expand with different ships that you could add to your fleet. You could have different ages represented throughout history. So they had one where they're going to do like the Napoleonic Wars, and then they had another one where they're going to do modern vessels, that kind of thing. And just because it didn't take off, none of that really got off the ground. And that's so unfortunate because, like I said, it was a lovely game, and I think it would have been fun to get into.
My number one really saddens me, and that's Rise of Augustus, also known as Augustus. This is affectionately known as Gamer Bingo. This is the runner-up to the 2013 Spiel des Jahres. I do not understand why Hanabi won, but to its credit, Hanabi has still stayed around and been relevant. It's not on my list, though. I don't know if it's on either of yours. I was talking to Dara about this a couple of months ago, even before we had the idea for the panel, and I wanted to introduce it to something, and Dara was totally right about it. And she was saying, do you remember what you said?
Looks very boring.
It looks very boring. I think the theme really hurts the game here. If you say to a new player, hey, do you want to play a game about Caesar conquering his objectives throughout Rome? They're like, no. If you were to say to them, hey, do you want to play Gamer Bingo? Tell me more. So I think if they had, this may be a game that could have done better as an abstract, because it really is Gamer Bingo. It's playing 3 games of bingo simultaneously, and you get special powers and combo moves. Everyone I've taught this game to really seems to like it. It's going over really well. But again, that's my sphere of influence, and it did not take off. I think if it had won, it'd be a completely different story. I think the publisher heard it a little bit. This was designed by Hurricane Games, who did Mr. Jack. That's the Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty cat and mouse game series. It was designed by Paulo Mori, who did Ethnos, Libertalia, for some reason Unusual Suspects, that doesn't really fit in with the rest of it, who's a good designer, but it had a very terrible rulebook. I'm someone who's a professional game demonstrator, and I had to sit for 30 minutes and figure out the rulebook. It took me longer to figure out how to play than to actually play the game because it's a very terrible rulebook. I think that really hurt it. But mostly, the theme didn't do the game any favors. It doesn't look particularly interesting. Maybe a little bit of marketing. That game could have done a lot better.
For my second game, this is one that I have not played. And so if I'm wrong about this and it's still very popular, just like shake an angry fist at me. Same with my game after this. The game is Rampage, which was renamed Terror in Meeple City. It is a dexterity game where you are a giant monster trying to destroy a city. The theme might seem familiar if you played King of Tokyo, but in this game you are instead trying to destroy the city by literally dropping your figure onto the city and knocking meeples all about, or by blowing it, literally blowing air to blow the stacks down. From every review that I saw, it looks very fun. I cannot imagine why people wouldn't want to continue to play a game where everyone's blowing on it. But I think in general, dexterity games are very difficult to maintain. They're a lot of fun at like conventions to play, but because of the limitations of you having to walk around the table, having to worry about pieces falling down and the setup and everything else, I think that probably a good deal of its not continuing to be played as much today is the dexterity aspect. Another part might be that the name Rampage was also a popular video game, and so there's a lot of confusion there, which I guess they tried to address when they renamed it.
All right, my second one was called Rivet Wars. It was published by ILO. It was kickstarted successfully, and it was thought to be the start of kind of a big deal, a whole new system. They had half a dozen expansions and over 15 promos made for the game, but it largely flew under the radar. It's another kind of tabletop miniatures / board game type experience, and it's a 1v1 game where you're using these little figures to combat. And it's got like a little bit of a cartoonish art to it, but it's basically like World War II fighting. So there was like Nazi factions and then Axis Allies factions. And it was a very simple, very easy to access game. The rules were fairly basic. They were easy to catch on to. You could play a game in about half an hour. It was really cute. The miniatures were well done, good quality, accessible artwork. It wasn't off-putting. I know some war games can be a little bit off-putting because of the realistic portrayals, but this one was very cute, very accessible, and like I said, with so much behind it. I mean, half a dozen expansions for any game is fairly significant. So for it to not take off was a little bit unusual, I thought. It, it's I think part of the reason that this one struggled is because I personally hold the belief that war games, especially ones where there are Nazis involved, are something that some people tend to shy away from simply because of the theme. And I totally understand that. I refuse to play Secret Hitler, even though I think that that's a solid game. I just won't be a part of that just because of the theme. So I think in part, some of Rivet Wars' issue was the theme. I think that they had tried to undercut the potential train wreck there by making it cuter in its artwork and by making it friendlier looking and that kind of thing. But I think that may have been part of the problem. You know, we're making light of this war scenario. But I think at its core, the mechanics of the game were fun. They were simple to learn. They were easy to teach. And the game itself, you could play a fairly quick game and have a good time with it, and then move on to something else. So this one was kind of surprising to me that it didn't make it. It was really well produced. This one was Cool Mini or Not, I believe, had part of this one, and they did a great job producing it. The price point, again, a little bit frightening. It's in the upper $80 or $90 range, I think. So again, not exactly the most approachable price range, but such a fun and interesting experience that I was surprised that this one didn't do better over a longer period of time.
My number 2 is a game that I'm fairly positive most of you have heard of because I just mentioned it 5 minutes ago, and that's Libertalia. Not trying to pick on the same designer, it just happened to work out that way. Libertalia is published by Marabunta, a subsidiary of Asmodee, who basically publishes everything these days, so you can't say that it's the publisher's fault because they own more companies than they don't own, it seems. Sorry, Mayfair, rest in peace. So it's the same designer as Rise of Augustus, but for Libertalia, what's ironic is that this is a hidden role selection game that's pirate themed. So a lot of people like pirate games. The hidden role selection is great, but the irony is that a lot of people were touting it as a game that killed Citadels, because Citadels came out in 2000, very popular hidden role collection, still one of my favorite games of all time. Yet Libertalia has done nothing, no expansion since 2013, and Citadels just got re-released in 2016. So it's like, who's the last man standing? The game that was attempting to kill the other didn't really do anything. And Libertalia is a fantastic game, but it also has a little bit of a learning curve because there's so many roles. There's 30 different roles, and you only choose, I think it's going to be 9 plus 6 and 6. So you're not using all the roles, but you're using a subset, and that makes it so that way you don't want to play the game with the same roles again, but you introduce new roles, and as a result, it takes people longer to catch on, and I think that may have hurt the game in the long run. Citadels is very simplistic, 1 through 8, maybe 9. You can mix in the Dark City expansion if you really want to. I actually don't like the 2016 expansion, but the fact still stands. Citadels ended up winning out in the game in the end, and that's a theme that you're going to see on my list in a little bit.
My third choice was Steam Park, and I'm willing to admit I might be wrong about this. I chose it mostly because it had a board game ranking about the same as Rampage, and because I know no one who plays it. We don't have it in stock at the store. I haven't seen it around, but I have extreme doubt because exactly yesterday somebody came into the store and asked if we had Steam Park because you saw that they played it on tabletop in last summer. So maybe this is gonna have a resurgence because of the popularity of tabletop and Will Wheaton, but maybe I'm just wrong. Steam Park is a game where you are building a theme park and trying to attract robots as guests. It has a very impressive table presence, including a 3D roller coaster ride. So I'm not sure why it didn't maintain, and I could also be wrong about it because of bias of what I see played and what I don't.
Okay. So my last one for this category is Titanium Wars. I did misspeak in my last one. I was talking about Rivet Wars in the last one. I said that was published by ILO. I'm sorry, that's actually Titanium Wars that I was thinking about. I knew I shouldn't have picked two with wars in the title, but I did it anyway. So Titanium Wars was published by ILO, and it's a fairly simple card game. Has anybody played this one? Titanium Wars? No? Okay. It's a fairly simple card game about space exploration where you're discovering these new planets, and there's a little bit of confrontation to it. You are fighting with your opponents to who can get to the new planets first. It's a very simple card game, but I think part of the barrier to entry here is the initial setup and the rule book. You actually spread out cards all over the surface of the play space. And so it looks way more complex than it is. If you just glance at the table, it looks like there's a lot going on, and it would be a lot to pick up on, but that's really not actually accurate. It's very simple. It's just because of the setup, it tends to look a little bit more complex. But it was fun. It was light. It was easy. And it was a solid game. It had some solid mechanics to it. And I don't think it really had any issues as far as the mechanics of the game. If you wanted to play the game itself, it wasn't like there was any, it wasn't like there was a runaway leader or, something was terribly broken. Nothing like that. It was fairly solid. It just didn't do well. They had some big plans for this game. They did release one expansion and had plans for more, but it just dropped off so quickly that they nixed all that, and they said, well, okay, that's done. We're basically, we'll wash our hands of that. We're never going to speak of it again. And I actually own this game, and I love to play it. It just doesn't come off the shelf that often, even for myself, knowing that, hey, this is a good game. Even I don't play it that often. So I'm not exactly sure what the issue is with this one here. It looks great. The artwork is very compelling. The components are well done. Like I said, the mechanics are solid. And this one just gets passed over quite often.
If I'm not mistaken, because I am familiar with that game, the player count for that game is 3 or 4 players.
Yes.
That is a very difficult player count. The fact that Catan has survived for so long as a 3 or 4 player game is just a testament to its strength, but it's really hard to get 3 people, then get one more and stop. I'm demoing a 3 to 4 player game where I had to basically claw and find people. Then when I did, I had to start turning people away because it's 3 or 4, and I only own 1 copy. So I think that also hurt the game, and that's precisely why I did not buy it. Because that was Cool Stuff was begging to get rid of that game for like $10, and I wouldn't pull the trigger because of the player count.
That's a good point.
My number 3 is a bit of a surprise, and that's Relic Wonders, which is from Days of Wonder. It was one of their 2013. It was their 2013 release. Days of Wonder, if you're not familiar, is one of the major publishers of board games. They own the rights to Ticket to Ride, Memoir 44, Shadows over Camelot, and Small World. 4 of the most celebrated games of all time have come from their factory. They also have Mr. the Abbey, which has been extremely popular in my out-of-print series this weekend. 5 Tribes is another game that's been really popular. They are one of the major first-name players. But this game didn't do nearly as well as I think it was expected to. I went back and watched some videos about it in the past, and people are like, this game is going to sell, this game is going to sell. Well, the numbers say otherwise. So, in terms of ratings, Small World has 47,000 ratings. Shadows over Camelot, 21,000. Ticket to Ride, 53,000. 5 Tribes has 21,000. Relic Runners, in terms of the number of times it's been rated by people, 1,771. That is a massive drop-off. Why didn't this game do well? I don't think anyone really knows. It actually looks like a really interesting game. I've had an opportunity to play it. I've always gotten distracted away from it, so I never got to pull the trigger. But this is a pretty different title for them. This is a route exploration game where you're placing routes along the board, hoping to use it efficiently later. And it adds a lot of things. It has an exploration mechanism similar to Decal, which is a very celebrated game. But I think the problem is that the expectations of Days of Wonder crushed this game. It's really hard when you have 2009 in Small World, one of the greatest games of all time, in my opinion, definitely in the Hall of Fame. Then they follow up with one of its most controversial games, Mystery Express, which is actually one of my most prized possessions. Thanks, hon. That honestly, a lot of people do not like, and I think the world wasn't ready for it because it's so brainy and it really hurts your head to play. Cargo Noir was a little bit of a bust. Small World Realms didn't have the impact that Small World did, so by the time it got to Relic Wonders in 2013, I think people were gun shy because it's like, it's good, but it's not Ticket to Ride, it's not Small World, and I think the expectations about Days of Wonder really hurt this game from basically reaching its full potential. So that was our list for the games that didn't make it in 2013 and did not stand the test of time. What are the ones that we are still talking about today?
My first choice is number 13, currently on Board Game Geek, and that is Caverna. I am not sure why it's still being played because I have a heavy bias against games about farming. I don't understand the appeal as somebody who grew up on a farm and actively tries to avoid everything farm related. What I think is very interesting about this game, which is a moderately heavy Euro game, is that it is kind of a sequel to Agricola, which is also a farming Euro game by the same designer. And what's interesting to me is that Agricola is currently rated number 15. So the fact that one did not displace the other is saying that there's something very compelling about both of these games to a lot of gamers. I personally am not sure what it is, except for it has a very renowned designer behind it. And I think people have an affinity for building something. At the end of the game, you see this nice farm you've created or these caverns you've explored or what have you. So I'm sure some people will disagree with my disinterest in Caverna, but it is number 13.
All right, my first pick was Viticulture. And I'm going to be honest, this was one of the games that immediately sprang to my mind for this category. My work in the local stores has shown that this game had a major resurgence in popularity just recently. Earlier this year, for whatever reason, we had a hard time keeping this game on the shelves. I think in part that may have been because in 2015 it was republished as the Viticulture Essential Edition, which was almost like a new edition of the game. They reworked it just a little bit, cleaned it up a little bit, and they re-released it as the Essential Edition. So this one is a worker placement game about owning a vineyard and competing with the other players to have the most prosperous vineyard. I have not played this game, but I've been interested in this game for a long, long time. Probably maybe like a year and a half. I've wanted to play this game. And honestly, it doesn't look that great. It's not like it's got really eye-catching artwork or great components or anything like that. Oh, I'm getting stares from the audience, but I personally just don't think it looks super terrific. It's not like it's not like you walk by the table and you're like, oh my gosh, what is that? But it just, there's something about it that just really catches your attention. And it looks, I'm not going to say fun necessarily, but it looks like a challenge that would be interesting to try to beat, you know? And I think that the theme of this game, the vineyard owning and making a vineyard prosperous and stuff like that, I don't think that's one that's overly played out yet. A lot of other worker placement games tend to have themes that, yeah, we've seen that 100 times at this point. I think the vineyard theme, it's a different enough spin on like the farming theme to where it still seems fresh, maybe not necessarily new, but fresher, that kind of thing. And I think that, like I said, with the Essential Edition having come out a couple of years ago, I think that gave it a little bit of a boost, but it must be a game with good sticking power anyway, since from 2013 to 2015, it did well enough to where they said, okay, we're going to re-release a new edition of it. And then from 2015 to now, people are still trying to get their hands on that game, still playing, and still enjoying the game. So.
My first one for the surviving 2013 shouldn't really need much of an introduction. It came out in early 2014. When I saw it on a business trip being played, I watched it, and by watching it, I determined I would buy it. it felt that special at the time. In terms of the number of ratings on Board Game Geek, it's number 17, which means people are voting on it. It's sold in a lot of mass market stores. It's continually played almost everywhere I go. It survived a terrible expansion, and I believe it should be put in the Board Game Hall of Fame, and that's Splendor. I checked the logs for the free-to-play area. How many times Splendor was mentioned? Constantly. Multiple copies. People are constantly checking it out. People love to hate it, but Splendor is still being played constantly. There are games that are trying to kill it. Splendor is still being played constantly. Everyone says it's going to die. Splendor is still being played constantly. I think it needs no introduction. It's not quite at the Pandemic, the Small World, and the Ticket to Ride, but it's there. It's only going to go upwards. Put it in the Hall of Fame. Splendor has survived the test of time.
I would actually say that Splendor is a classic, and that is not something that I say lightly, but I think that it is.
No comment. Second game on my list is Lords of Waterdeep. It is a D&D themed worker placement game. It is one that I have played, yay, and I enjoy quite a bit. It is fairly straightforward. You are playing as a lord and you're sending adventurers out to complete quests on your behalf, but the theme can get lost in the fact that these adventurers are all little different colored cubes. So you'll be like, hand me an orange cube and hand me a purple cube, not hand me a fighter and a mage or a wizard. But I think its success is in part that it's very streamlined, straightforward, and the crossover with D&D fans and accessibility. So it now has a 7.8 average ranking on BGG with over 33,000 rankings. So I think it's made its place.
And the app has definitely helped it too. That is a very... I'm told that the app blew up their UI and that has hurt it in the long run. But before that, it was one of the most played apps, and that has certainly helped its candidacy as well.
All right, my next pick is a co-op game called Eldritch Horror. This game came out in 2013. It supports 1 to 8 players, so you can play this game as a solo game. And I think that that is a small part of the reason that this one is done so well, is that you don't need anybody to play with you. If you wanted to just pull it off the shelf and play by yourself, you can. But if you wanted to play with friends, you can support up to 8. So it has a great range for player count. I think that's always a good thing for a game. I think that the theming of this game is also another reason that it does well. This is an Eldritch themed game, so this is set in the Cthulhu H.P. Lovecraft mythos universe. And the publishers of this game have done an exceptional job with the release schedule. So they put out the base game in 2013, and at this point there are probably about half a dozen or more expansions for it. And each one of them is very eye-catching. They look fun. They look exciting. And I think that between having solid mechanics and having the eye-catching artwork that comes out on a consistent basis, I think all of those things have worked really well together for the Eldritch Horror series to become a strong player, even though it has been several years since this one's come out. I myself haven't gotten to play this one. I would like to at some point. I'd love to play all the games. One of those like pet all the dog people. I would love to play every game ever, even if it's the worst one. But I would like to play this at some point. I'm a little bit afraid that if I do, I'm going to fall in love, and then there's going to be this major backlog of games for me to have to collect and buy and play through, which is a good thing for everything but the wallet. So that's my number 2 pick here, Eldritch Horror.
My number 2 is Love Letter. Many people will be surprised that this game was imported from Japan, but it actually is a Japanese game, and as is Lost Legacy, the game that succeeded it. And whereas Lost Legacy has sadly not survived the test of time, which is the reason why I'll be demoing it immediately after this panel, Love Letter has, despite Lost Legacy being the better game. I can't say that enough. It's simple. People like simple. Draw a card, play a card, do what it says, shenanigans. You know, the game speaks for itself. There's been multitudes of versions, Munchkin, Batman, Adventure Time. I'm not going to say which one is better than the other, but I know what Dara is going to say. And Love Letter has just done extremely well for AEG. It created a whole genre of micro games. I've actually kind of soured on it, honestly, mostly because of Lost Legacy. I like that so much more, but there's no denying the impact Love Letter has had on the industry and continues to have today.
if you guys haven't played Love Letter, I would actually suggest try Lovecraft Letter. It's a bit of a reskin on the game, but it's really good.
Or try Lost Legacy immediately after this panel, up to 12 spots.
Or that.
Adventure Time Love Letter is better than the original Love Letter because the original Love Letter has a slightly creepy theme. You can fight me about it.
But Adventure Time, you could literally win the game by just having the right 2 cards in your hand. Like, oh,
That's okay.
I won.
It's a short game. It's okay to have a little bit of random luck. My third choice is Star Wars X-Wing, which is a miniatures game where you are piloting ships from the Star Wars universe. So I think it's kind of straightforward why this is popular. Star Wars is a very popular IP. And Fantasy Flight, the publisher, has given it a lot of support to help the community thrive. It has a low barrier to entry cost-wise. It is actually one that I purchased and then gave away later when I realized that the base game would not be enough if I actually wanted to play. It has a very high toy factor because you have these awesome, amazing, detailed ships. So people who are into Star Wars, not me, would really love this game, and I can see why.
All right, my last pick for this category was Forbidden Desert. This was the second in the Forbidden Island franchise. They came out with Forbidden Island first, then Forbidden Desert. And it actually ranked higher than Forbidden Island did. So I personally like Forbidden Island a little bit better than Forbidden Desert, but I can see how Forbidden Desert fills a niche that Forbidden Island didn't quite make it into. They're both fairly similar games in their overall mechanics and strategies. They're cooperative games where you're trying to escape from a particular area by collecting things. So in Forbidden Island, the island is sinking, you're collecting treasures and then trying to get off the island. In Forbidden Desert, the sands are shifting around you, and you're trying to build an airship so that you can get out. I think this one is stuck around because it's a well-done cooperative game. Co-ops are not necessarily my favorite thing, but people are always looking for a good game that they can play with people without starting a fight. There's enough games out there where we tend to get kind of hot-headed with each other as we play, but it's always good to have a light cooperative game. You can pull out and play less than a half an hour, let things cool off a little bit. So this one, I was a little bit on the fence about whether or not this was actually gonna that this one has actually survived for the last 5 years. I think that it's well known, and I think that it's recognizable, but I don't know that people are necessarily still playing this on a frequent basis. But I put it on the list because you may or may not know that this summer they're actually releasing the third game in this trilogy, Forbidden Sky, and I think that when Forbidden Sky comes out, that it's actually going to boost the sales of the previous 2 games in the series, at least for a period of time. That may die off again, but I think that for now, it's going to stay on my list. Forbidden Desert.
So 2 things. One, I want to say that if the helicopter you need on Forbidden Island doesn't crash in the desert, and then the experimental flying machine doesn't send you into the sky, that is a massive missed opportunity on their part. They should link all the games together. Like, just save people one disaster after another. The second thing is, I disagree with you, actually. A year ago, I would have agreed with you, but with all the new pandemics that have come out, I think interest in Forbidden Desert has tanked significantly, because you got Pandemic Iberia, Rising Tide, Rising Cthulhu, the Legacies. I think that's going to really hurt Forbidden Desert in the long run, which is odd because it's all the same designer.
I think if you're a midweight gamer or a heavier gamer and you're looking for a co-op experience, try something in the Pandemic line. If you're a light gamer or you play with light gamers, the Forbidden line is fun and very accessible. So, but I tend to agree with Jim, unfortunately.
My number 3, if you know me personally, should not come out as a surprise, and that's Smash Up. Smash Up has made its way into the mass market, came out in late 2012. It's being sold in Target. In fact, Target has started selling its expansions, which is crazy to think of, that an expansion for a game. Here it's like, do we sell the game or not? Now you're starting to see the expansions pop up. And I think there's a lot of reasons as to why Smash Up has stayed on for so long and continue to produce content. The first one is that the fan base is extremely passionate. Not just myself. People love the content. And so it may not have the global popularity, but for the people who love it, they have everything that they have. And you just keep buying all the sets that come out. That 70s expansion will be out in March. And I think a passionate fan base can carry a game for a long time. It's a relatively low-cost game, and it has never been out of print. All the expansions have been in play at all times, so you can pick up at any point, not worry about missing anything. The other thing I was going to say about Smash Up is that I hear that they have a brand new podcast launching Wednesday at 3 p.m. by a team of 3 people who totally know what they're doing, and I feel like that's going to help the game a lot. Oh, and the website is called crankituppodcast.com.
Check it out.
So that was it for the 2013 things that have survived. And now we're going to go on to 2017. This is a lot more fun because this is where we're probably going to get some angry looks from the people or some voices of celebration. What are the games that we love or don't love that we feel are not going to survive the test of time?
My first choice, not expected to make it, is Islebound, designed by Ryan Lockett. It is a game in which you take command of a ship and you sail around recruiting sea pirates and sea monsters, and it sounds really cool, but I can't tell you if it is or not because I immediately bought it, and immediately afterwards Near and Far came out by the same designer, and so I still have not played my copy of Islebound because Near and Far came out, and it is an amazing game, and it has already surpassed it in rankings. Islebound is number 645, and Near and Far is already number 164, so this is a game where it's not going to be Agricola and Caverna existing peacefully together in the rankings. Near and Far has completely replaced Islebound, unfortunately. Or actually, maybe fortunately, Near and Far is really good, and I don't know if Islebound is yet. So,
all right. So my top choice for this category makes me really, really sad. It's the game I was talking about at the beginning here. It's Seafall. Seafall is a legacy game that came out 2016, and it's supposed to be kind of a 4X game, which is explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. It was supposed to be inspired by that 4X kind of feel. It was so exciting to me. I was so excited. I absolutely fell in love with legacy games after I played Pandemic Legacy Season 1. The thought of having a game that changes and grows with you as you play it was just incredible to me. I absolutely loved my experience with Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I had an amazing time. It's probably one of my top experiences in the industry ever, just because I felt so immersed in the storyline and in the game, and I just had an incredible time with the Pandemic Legacy. When the Seafall Legacy was announced, I was so excited because I was like, it's going to be that same feeling. I'm going to have this big, huge adventure to go on. Like I said, I love the ocean. I love the exploration of the ocean, pirates and ships and that kind of thing. I've always been attracted to that sort of storyline, and I thought Seafall is going to be amazing. It's going to be like I'm out there on the ocean, piloting my own boat and fighting with pirates and exploring new lands, and I was so excited about this one. I pre-ordered it. Like I said, I never pre-order anything ever, but I pre-ordered this. I bought the upgraded coins. They were like metal coins you could buy. I got it like 3 weeks early. I think they sent it out for people who pre-ordered that you got it 3 weeks early. I set my group up, got everybody ready to play, poured through the rule book, watched all the videos, and then we sat down to play, and it was just tedious for hours and hours, and it was so disappointing. I thought, okay, well, maybe in the next game, now that we kind of know what we're doing a little bit better, maybe it'll get better. And then we played the next game, and it wasn't better, and then we played the next game, and it wasn't better, and the guys that I were playing with actually started to get really bored, and I hated that. I wanted them to be having a good time, and I wanted to be having a good time, and they started playing poker in between turns. It takes forever to get back to your turn, so they would like play a hand of poker in between their turns. I'm like, well, they're not having fun. I'm not having fun. Nobody's having fun with this. Why are we bashing our heads against the wall trying to make this fun when clearly it's not going to be? Now, I do have to caveat this. We didn't finish the campaign. Obviously, we dropped out a couple games in. Maybe if you struggle all the way through to the end, it is an amazing experience. We just weren't going to do that. This one was so disappointing for me because of that, and I'm honestly a little bit surprised because this is the same designer behind Betrayal at House on the Hill, which is a majorly popular game. He also was responsible for the Widow's Walk expansion, and he's responsible for the upcoming Betrayal Legacy game, which hopefully, fingers crossed, will be a little bit better than Seafall. And he did work on Risk Legacy and Pandemic Legacy Season 1. So he had enough experience with legacy games to know what works and what doesn't, and I don't know exactly what happened here, but it all went sideways.
My number one is Secret Hitler, which has already been mentioned. And it's not even about the game, it's about the plan and the fact that I don't think there is one. I had to look this up very carefully. For the bio of the designers, their bio says the designers of Secret Hitler. For the company that published it, their bio says the company that published Secret Hitler. So, what is the plan going forward? It was a Kickstarter. It's not really a retail game. I don't know how they're planning to continue it going on. I think they said like, "Hey, want to make a board game? Sure," and they did it. Like, now what? Like, we'll do something else. I don't think there's a plan going forward for Secret Hitler. I think eventually people will get tired of the theme because the gameplay is just simply not as good as some of the other social deduction games, in my opinion. So, due to availability issues and just people tiring, I think Secret Hitler will be gone or faded from time in the next 5 years.
I think you underestimate how edgy people like to be, so I think it'll stick around a little longer.
But how are they going to get it?
I don't have time to debate this. My second choice is Spyfall. It is basically 20 questions. One player is a spy, and everyone else has a location card, so everyone knows where they are except for one player, and the spy is trying to find out where everyone is without revealing that they don't know where everyone is. This is a great game. It is a lot of fun. I highly recommend you play it, but it had a fatal flaw where they did not include a player aid to list all the locations for the players. So everyone is expected to share the rule book to look at the locations. And so the spy takes too long looking at the rule book or is the only one looking at the locations. It's very obvious. They had a chance to fix this when they released Spyfall 2, and there was a high demand for them to do so, and they chose not to. They released pretty much the same game with the same problem, which is why I won't buy it, even though I love the first one. Spyfall 2 is ranked 1,428, and they have plans to release a DC Spyfall, which could be very exciting, but I think that, like me, a lot of people have had enough and will not buy it out of principle.
That's a terrible idea. Like, are there going to be actual locations in DC lore?
I don't know. I lost interest when I realized that it was Spyfall and they messed up already.
Because, I mean, like, if you get Thanagar, how many people are going to know what Thanagar is? But, so, I did not put Spyfall on my list, but it was the reason why I came up with this topic. Because I'm like, Spyfall has screwed this up. I agree with everything Dara said, but I'd like to add that they changed the player count from 8 to 12, and they said that you could buy a second set, but you have to buy a whole second set and basically throw away half the cards to convert Spyfall 1 into Spyfall 2. Instead of creating an upgrade pack where it's like, here are, 3 more cards from the base game, and here's a roaming spy. Problem solved, much cheaper. It's really hard to have like a group of 10 people and be like, well, there's only 8 cards here, so I guess like 2 of you can't go. It was like, oh, there's 12 cards. Guess it's a Spyfall 2 location. They could not have handled this worse, in my opinion. But since I tore into them on the airing of grievances, I actually cut it off my list. I'm glad to see that you're standing up for the little guy, whoever that is. The player aid, that's who you're standing up for.
All right, so my second pick is Arkham Horror, the card game. Now, I actually love this game. I own everything that has ever come out for this game. I bought the novels so I could get the promo cards that came with them. I competed in a recent event so I could get the custom playmat. I've got all of it, right? I've got hundreds of dollars tied up in this game, but unfortunately, I don't believe it's going to be around in 5 years. Now, this game is a solid game. It's actually won several awards. It won the 2017 South by Southwest Tabletop Game of the Year. It won the International Gamers Award for General Strategy for 2 players. It's also won the Golden Geek Best Card Game for 2016. In Board Game Geek, it is rated the #1 customizable game right now. #1 customizable game. It's also overall in the top 17. It's number 17 in the top rankings on Board Game Geek, and number 8 in thematic games. So some really strong stuff behind this game, and it's a wonderful game. It's gorgeous. The artwork is really well done. It is incredibly immersive, very thematic, beautiful in a really gory, nasty kind of way, but fantastic. It is a co-op game with a LCG component to it. So there's a living card game. You buy chapter packs, scenario packs, that kind of thing to continue to bolster the experience. And it's from Fantasy Flight. So they are known for putting out games like this. And honestly, they do a pretty solid job with their production. However, I think because of Fantasy Flight's past production with similar games, it won't be around in 5 years. I think in about 2, maybe 3 years, it'll start to drop off a little bit, and then they will produce little things here and there for it for a little while. But eventually, it's going to die, and that's sad because it's a really well done game. If you haven't tried it and you like this type of game, I'd really recommend it. The theme can throw some people off. Like I said, it can be a little bit gory, but it's a really, really well done game for the theme, the artwork, the adventure. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's going to stick around.
My number 2 is King Domino, which also makes me sad. And it's not because of the game, but because of the way the game was handled. I think they released Queen Domino too quickly, and they didn't stand up for their game. I admit, I didn't like King Domino at first, but I played it a bunch and realized there's a lot more of a game there. Then all of a sudden, people started to attack it, so they made Queen Domino instead. And as a result, people are like, do I play one? Do I play the other? I think what they did is they created a game that no one really wants because it's slightly above a game that they think was too easy, but too below a game that they think is relevant. And I just think they mishandled it. They should have stood behind their product. And King Domino, despite winning the Spiel des Jahres, will fade. That makes me sad.
My third choice is Star Wars Destiny. It's a collectible card game for 2 players. It has really nice chunky dice. I don't believe it will last because although Star Wars fans are rabid collectors, their pockets are not limitless. And so I think that Fantasy Flight is putting out just too much Star Wars content. Another thing is collectible card game mixed with dice can be a frustrating experience, at least in my personal experience. So I don't think that's necessarily the best idea once the novelty wears off. It also had a very rocky launch from Fantasy Flight where the product was not available to begin with. And so a lot of the smaller stores missed out, and they don't have a thriving community for the tournaments anymore or never did because of that.
All right, so my last choice in this category was actually a game that I really loved. It's called Sagrada. It's from Floodgate Games, and it was an excellent little 2 to 4 player game where you could, 1 to 4 player. You could actually play this one solo. So like a puzzle game where you could draft dice from a bag, and then you would arrange them in this little cutout to form a stained glass. And it was almost more like a puzzle than it was really a game. And I think that Sagrada will not be around in 5 years, but what I do think is that it has prompted the industry to recognize games of this nature, this puzzly type game that's almost more of a puzzle than it really is a game. And I think what we'll see is that there's actually going to be a subcategory emerge for games. We have, worker placement games. We have, hand management games. I think we'll see puzzle games become a category that's more recognized, and games like Sagrada and like Azul, which is a new game that I feel falls kind of into the same category. I feel like those types of games will start to be recognized as more of this subcategory of games than as just games in general.
Yeah, that makes me sad too. My number 3 is another Days of Wonder game, the 2017 one, and that's Yamatai. And it's nothing against the game, but I just like to point out that when you look at what Days of Wonder has done, most of their games have been in the 2.5 or lower range. Mystery Express was 2.67. It didn't do well. I'm wondering if 5 Tribes at 2.9 average weight is a bit of a fluke, but it's a complex game, but one that has a very simple rule set. It's just your turns are very difficult to do, and I think that's why 5 Tribes succeeded. But Yamatai is heavier than 5 Tribes, and it doesn't have many ratings at all, 25-12. Compare that to Quadropolis, the game before, 68-62, which is a much simpler game. I just wonder if it's a little bit beyond what Days of Wonder should be doing, and that's why not as many people have been playing it. So finally, we'll get to the list that we think are games that we believe are going to survive, and this is going to be fun. I hope we're right on all of them, except for Dara's.
My first choice, I decided to cheat, and I chose 2 games. They are by the same publisher, and they are kind of a bit underdog-y because of some choices and mishaps that the publisher has had. I really want these to succeed. I will personally teach you these games if you'd like to make this true so that Jim is wrong. Century Spice Road is the first one, and the second one is Azul. They were both by Plan B Games. Century Spice Road had some hiccups. Was immediately branded as a Splendor Killer, and I still hope that it will. There were problems because they made a retheming Golem edition, and they told people that it wouldn't be available in retail stores, that it was only going to be at conventions and directly through their website. And then they went back on that later, which frustrated a lot of people who went ahead and bought Spice Road because they didn't think the Golem edition was going to be available. So I think that mishap has caused a little distrust with the consumer base. The second game, so basically it's just a soulless cute pusher, and I love it. The second game is Azul. It is an abstract game with nice, chunky, beautiful tiles. It has a lovely table presence, and you're just drafting tiles to make your little design. A little bit of hate drafting involved, but it's a great game. It's not in stock right now, and I think that is harming it. It is very critically acclaimed, but it is also kind of how much of this is because we can't get it right now that we're hyping it up so much. I think that if they address it and have it available, it has a chance to succeed, but they also need to fix one of the component problems, which is that the point tracker is very fiddly and you can just knock it off the table very easily. But that's my hope, that they'll fix those things.
All right, so mine is Mechs versus Minions. This was a fairly large game that came out in 2016. It's gorgeous. I mean, you open the box and everything inside is just beautiful. Really well done. Super, super high production quality. And so this one is a co-op campaign game for 2 to 4 players. I think because of how well done the game is, how fun that it is. Everyone I've ever talked to about this game has just talked about how much fun they've had playing this game. And because of the campaign nature of the game, I think that this one could stick around for several years. It's already been out for a couple of years now, and there are people who still want to start playing this game for the first time. So I think that because of just how wonderful the components are, how well done everything was, and because of that campaign aspect that people are going to want to get involved in, I think this one will stick around. I'm hoping that the publisher for this one will start doing more. Initially, this was created by and published by a company that typically does video games. But based on how well they did with Mechs vs. Minions, I'm really hoping that we can see some other stuff come out of them.
My number one is Clank. I think Clank as a deck builder combined with an adventure game creates a unique experience that will make it survive. I don't think Clank in Space has invalidated the game. I think people will want both and they'll play both. They have a good expansion model, and I think that it was kind of what deck building needed. It was deck building with a purpose. You start to see like the Quest for El Dorado from Marta Knizia doing the same thing, giving a reason to deck building, and I think Clank will end up surviving in the end.
My second choice is Mysterium, which I think will last for another 5 years. I'm not sure about beyond that. But it is a cooperative game where players are psychics, other than one player who is a ghost, and the ghost is sending vision cards to the players who need to determine how the ghost died. So this has a very familiar concept because it's very Clue-like. So I think that makes it very accessible. It plays up to 7 players, and it's just a very smooth, great game, very family-friendly, but also gamer-friendly. So I think that it will last for a good 5 years.
All right, my next one is actually kind of like an umbrella. It's the Exit Escape Room games from Cosmos. They've come out with probably about 10 of these Exit games so far, and I only foresee more. They are escape room games. So if you're familiar with the theory of an escape room, you go into a physical room and you get locked into this room and you have to escape from that using clues and puzzles that you solve and that kind of thing. Cosmos has attempted to bring this experience to the tabletop with these Exit games. Like I said, they have 10 right now. They're only going to come out with more. Excellent price point. They're $15 a piece. Now, this is a single-use game, so that can throw people off a little bit. You play this game one time, and it's pretty much you can't play it again because you rip up components or you write on the rule book or that kind of thing. So this is a single-use game, but for $15, for a tabletop simulation of an escape room with so many themes and storylines that they could pursue here. I think that they'll be creating these games for a long time.
For the record, I had that idea 3 years ago, wasn't able to pull it off. Cosmo swept in and won the Kennerspiel de Jahres. So I'm bittersweet about the fact that that may last because that could have been me, but whatever. My number 2, there aren't many games where I would argue with you passionately that this is the best game in the genre, but if you disagree, come find me and I will fight you until you rage quit. Deception Murder in Hong Kong is the best social deduction game. I play that at least once a month at the max player count. I've never gotten tired of it. It works like Mysterium. It works really well with new players because you may make the connections, but they don't, and you have to articulate it in their language. I think with the expansion that just came out, it's going to add a 14th player. It's going to add more replayability. Fantastic game. I'll happily play it anytime. One of my all-time favorites. Deception Murder in Hong Kong. Despite having a lot of competition in the genre, it is the best, in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure I'm right.
My third choice is actually the same as Sarah, so I'm going to let her talk about it. I'm just going to nod my head emphatically.
All right, so this one is actually the winner or nominee for over 20 different awards. It's Scythe. This one came out in 2016, and it just consistently sees play. This game is always on the table somewhere in the stores that I work at. It was a really interesting phenomena that it's done so well, that it's kind of taken the industry by storm like it has. But it has, and it's just held out already. It's been 2 years, and like I said, it's just seeing consistent play, consistent purchasing. People are still buying this game, and people are still excited to play this one. They've started to kind of trickle out some expansions and upgrades and stuff like that for it. And I think that their production schedule for this was intelligently done. They didn't rush to market too soon after the initial release of the game with anything new. And because the game is a little bit on the heavier side, I think that it allowed players to experience the full game before they started introducing new things through expansions and upgrades and stuff like that. So I think they did really well there. And then I think when players were ready for that new stuff, it was available to them. So I think they really did well on the timeline there. I personally have never played this game, but I'm proud of it for how well it has done.
I would like to add that they're slated to release a campaign expansion this year, and I'm really thrilled about the concept of an expansion that turns a game into a campaign instead of the game starting out that way.
My final pick is a dark horse candidate that I could easily be wrong about, but I would love to get video evidence of predicting this.
Hang on, I'm going to interrupt him for 1 second now. Jim wouldn't share this one with us. We discussed all of our picks except this one. So you guys are finding out what Jim's last pick is just the same time as Dara and I. And I'm excited to learn what it is and to see Dara and I's reactions as well as yours.
We only did that to make sure we didn't all be like Scythe, Terraforming Mars. So we didn't want to all pick the same game because that wouldn't be fun. But no, my dark horse candidate.
I've decided I'm going to agree with whatever you say. Just going to agree whatever you say.
All right, so Jim, what is it?
Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. Because despite the odds, Betrayal has continued to survive. I can't explain it, but people are playing it constantly, checked out numerous times. I see it played all the time. A game that many people say is broken and doesn't work, that I kind of like but don't like at the same time. Betrayal has survived against the odds and become one of the most popular games of all time. Combine that with the D&D theme of Baldur's Gate, a very popular video game and IP series, and I think that slowly, as Betrayal people realize, hey, I can get more Betrayal, and the fact that they fixed and cleaned up the game and prevented more lockups, I think Betrayal at Baldur's Gate will only be on the up and up. I think Betrayal Legacy will also do well for it and make people like, oh, this is another version of the game that I can play. So it's doing well. I think it will continue to do better, and it wouldn't be surprised me if it hangs on as an unofficial but corrected expansion to Betrayal at House on the Hill.
I think I'm going to be sick. I didn't expect this from you, Jim. I take back my automatic agreeing. It is a wonky, broken game that gives you very little decisions, and no.
I actually tend to agree with Dara. I have only played this game one time. I was the betrayer, and I won. So I figured I'd had the best possible experience I was going to have with the game. My very first try, I wasn't going to try it again, so I wouldn't ruin that. But I do think that Jim has an excellent point. This game has stuck around. People do like this one. And I think with the D&D kind of reskin to it, it is going to draw in more and different players than we would have seen otherwise. And it will play to that player base that's already totally head over heels for this one. So I think it's a good call.
So we have a little bit of time, and we'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts? Are there any games, from any one of the categories that you want to fight us about? Or if you want to make a suggestion and see what we think, please feel free. If not, I'm going to debate Century Spice Road with Dara.
Don't be shy.
We'll take that argument outside.
All right, we got one.
Just because Triangle Game Night put me up to it.
Erin is emphatically going, no, she did not, in the background. So you...
So what do you think?
Okay, so I'll actually ask
He's
my
going
real
to say
question.
Mall Madness, right?
I will say Mall Madness.
But
No.
that's not in the year
He
range,
is just
so
shooting
bye.
daggers. He's just shooting daggers at me right now.
So what's your actual question?
Okay, so my actual question is about a game from 2015 that all three of you have played,
You don't know me.
which is Fury of Dracula. So here's my question about it. With Dracula's name being on the cover, would you consider Dracula to be the protagonist, the antagonist, or an anti-hero?
Ooh,
It
that's a
depends
good
on if I'm
question.
playing as them.
Well, it depends on who's playing Dracula.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
Well,
agree
if
with
it's-
that.
If it's me, well, I'm the hero.
Boo.
So, well, whatever.
I think that in the second edition, he's the antagonist because he took 6 hours of my life. I think in the third edition, he only took 1 hour, and that makes him a hero.
I think, like Dara said, I think it depends on who controls the character and their personality and how they approach the character in the game and stuff like that. But I personally feel like he's probably the anti-hero, maybe. Anybody else? Any other questions? You guys want to discuss anything? Maybe we got one coming from the back. Take your time.
Hi, gang. All right, I actually have a question for Dara, Sarah, and the Bandit. You guys talked about games that you thought would make it in 5 years, and most of your commentary about it was good. We hear about the Tide Pod Challenge that, for whatever reason, people do dumb things, and it sticks around. What is a game that you think is going to last that shouldn't?
Betrayal at Baldur's Gate.
It's a fantastic question.
Century Spice Road. No, I'm just kidding. It will self-implode on its own. It doesn't need any help.
It's a great question. Man, there's a lot of games out there. I always feel a little bit like I'm betraying the industry or a designer or something like that when I speak badly about a game. I think that it takes a lot of work to bring a game to a table. It takes a lot of work to get it published, to get it into consumers' hands. And I think to some extent you should be rewarded just for going through that process. But I think you should be more rewarded if the game that you brought to the table is a good one. And with the accelerated nature of the industry, where we are seeing games come out so frequently, I think that there's a lot that will probably fade off fairly quickly just because either they aren't that great or because they were great and they're going to fly under the radar. I'm sure that there will be numerous games that stick around that maybe don't deserve that. At the moment, though, I can't think of any.
Just to be clear, you're
particular.
asking for a game that will survive but shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right, I'll fall on a sword. Exploding Kittens.
Ooh, I'm actually fully behind that.
Yeah.
That's
So,
fine with me.
When was that released?
I try not to be a gaming snob. I'm a fan of anything that gets people to playing games in any form.
Right.
But Exploding Kittens is not really a game. To me, it's a cash grab. It's like, if it weren't called Exploding Kittens, would it be as popular? No, and I think even they would admit it. Unexploded Cow by Paul Peterson, designer of Smash Up, hasn't nearly taken off in the same way, even though it's Unexploded Cow.
Yeah.
So, Exploding Kittens, I think that, it's people are still going to continue to play it, even though it's not really a game. They're just doing it more as a mockery. It's an activity. So that would be my pick for your question.
I thought of one. Munchkin. I flippin' hate that game. That is the trashiest piece of trash in our industry. And I know that that's very harsh, But I have, being a person who's worked in stores and stuff like that, there's so much Munchkin product. It just inundates the market, just all so much, and it's just a subpar experience to so many other games. But I think it's going to stick around, unfortunately.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying that Munchkin has already stood the test of time. I mean, I don't even know when it's come out. It's
I
been
had
so
to
long.
fight not to just knock him off the stage right there.
But it has survived, to its credit. Right or wrong, Munchkin is still relevant today.
If you like Munchkin, that's okay.
It's
It's not
okay.
me, but it's okay.
Like Jim said, if it gets you to sit down and play a game, I'm all for it. I do think there are better ones you could play, but if you're having a good time, that's what really matters.
Great question.
All right,
Thanks.
no problem.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone else?
Oh no.
Well, that's all the time we have, so thanks.
Well, I would just say that you keep saying that it's a problem, but I would say it's kind of a double-edged sword, that it's the whole reason that the hobby is becoming so popular now is because people buy so many games, even if they're not playing them all. And I mean, even some companies like Simon, pretty much they give a game a year and then push a new Kickstarter. So it's their whole business model that they're only really going to support a game for a year or so, and they're expecting it to fade off. And they kind of need people to keep buying more games. So why do you really think it is such a huge problem versus just it's part of the reason the hobby's so popular now? That so much content's coming in.
So what you're saying is that we struck a nerve?
No.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. So the question
I mean,
is
why do
that,
you think it's so?
No, I was going to repeat the
it is
question.
such a big problem. What?
So if I understand the question, it's, why is it a problem if it's actually been a very good thing for the industry?
Yeah, it's helping the industry, I think, a lot.
Sorry, I was having trouble hearing your mic. Does anyone want to take that before I go?
Well, I don't know that I would necessarily classify it as a problem, because you're right. These companies anticipate that this will be their production schedule, that this is the way that the industry will intake their games, is about 1 year's worth of gaming experience, and then we'll move on. And that tends to be what we do, which if the experience is fun and meaningful and it lasts for less than a year or just a little bit longer than that, okay. But on the other hand, there are... It's just that consumer nature of ours to suck in things and then move on to the next thing. And I think that the nature of this question really lies in, this is so meta, but the nature of this question really lies in like the nature of humanity. How much are we willing to intake, and how much are we willing to give back? And I think that with the industry pushing games on us, knowing like, hey, this probably isn't going to last for longer than a year. We're not going to have to support this. We're not going to have to come out with, revised rules if they don't make sense. I think that overall that leads to a subpar experience in the end. I think every once in a while it's no big deal to have a throwaway game. But I think going at the idea of creating a game thinking, oh, this only has to be good for X number of days before they're going to move on anyway. I think that in the long run, that can end up costing everyone because the experience is going to be lessened until it's just not as good as it could have been.
I was recently talking to my roommate about how some people have said that I have an addiction to board games, and her response was that it could be worse. I'm not doing drugs. So I don't think it's necessarily the worst problem, and I probably lean a little farther from Jim's opinion about the cult of the new, because I feel that as long as not every single person is going out and buying a brand new game every day, it is good to have individuals who are collectors who will buy a game, take a risk, and introduce it to other people and be ambassadors for board games. And I appreciate those people, and I think that it is good for the hobby.
So I'm going to take a counterpoint here that there's the possibility that it could lead to the industry imploding. The more games that you have, people will start to spend more time acquiring than actually playing. As a result, they'll stop buying, and the growth that the industry came to expect, if that ever were to stop and people just stop spending money, as a result, the industry could collapse. It's something that many people have theorized. I'm not saying that it's going to happen yet, but it certainly is a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it has the potential to happen if you oversaturate the market. The second thing I would say is that it creates a secondary market. What happens is that people stop supporting a particular game, it no longer gets published, it goes rare. As a result, people will just hold on to it. Instead of distributing games that people want, they inflate the price because it's rare, and as a result, games sit on the shelf and no one gets to enjoy them. I think that's also a consequence of having too many choices. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for attending. On behalf of Dara and Sarah, I'd like to thank you for coming to Playthrough and listening to us. I'm the Board Game Bandit, and our game has just begun.